time to come and look at a different industry and what's going on with the organization from a financial performance. So appreciate you to those of you that are joining us as we get going. If you're new to us, excited to have you here. Thank you for coming, and invite your colleagues if you like what we do in future sessions. Let me start with a couple polling questions as we get going today. First polling question I want to ask is around your attendance. Whether you're a participant from one of our programs. Are you a graduate from one of our programs? You should see on your screen the polling question. Now, when we do polls in WebEx, you got to make sure you submit your answer. Otherwise, it won't calculate there. But want to make sure people are comfortable with this. Yes, you've actually been part of one of our Building Business Acumen programs. Maybe you did our online Seeing the Big Picture program. Maybe you've been part of an earnings call, debrief, etc. But love to hear how many of you are graduates of our program. Go ahead and do that in the polling question there. Give you another few seconds here as we kind of get everybody connected. Now you might, I've never been. Well, then no worries. That's just fine. Well, hopefully we'll spark some interest, and you may find some of our resources helpful for you and your teams as we move forward. Let me just go ahead and close the polling real quick here. And we'll go ahead and share that with the group. It looks like about 37% of you, actually more than that, the majority of you, because you've got 24%. It's just been a while since you've taken our program. So only about 31% have not been there. So welcome to all of our graduates. Thank you for joining us. If you're new to this, that's okay. It's not expected to have a prerequisite to have been through one of our programs. Our goal is to really share the knowledge we have to help employees understand their company, how they make money, how decisions are made around the money-making process, but most importantly, what can you do within your role to impact your organization? Now, if in your sales roles, we do a lot with sales programs. Boy, how can I use my understanding of a business to help me become that trusted partner with my customer? That's what we do. And I can't think of a better thing to help you understand either your business or your customer's business than to listen to their earnings calls. So let me ask another quick polling question. My second polling question is around whether or not you've participated in this lab before. So I open that up. If yes, I've participated, or yes, I'm brand new to this, or no, I've been to a few of these this year, or maybe I've been to them last year. Just kind of get a feel for who's on the call with us today as far as your engagement around what the CEO needs you to know, earnings call labs. Going once, going twice. Looks like we're having people join us as we go. We're going to go ahead and close it here shortly. Have you participated in our What the CEO Needs You to Know webinar is the question. We'll go ahead and close that polling, and we'll capture the results there. Share that with the group. So it looks like, boy, about half of you, you're brand new. So thank you. Hopefully you'll find this to be helpful, and those that continue to come back. My commitment around this, if you participate in at least 2 or 3 consecutively, you'll start to get how to listen to these calls. You'll be very comfortable. So I highly recommend at least coming back at least 1 or 2 more times, and you'll feel more and more comfortable around listening to these earnings calls. Well, hey, that's one of the tools we'll be using throughout today is our polling. We're also going to use the chat box. So here's what I want to do. Make sure you have your chat box open. And the question is, where are you calling in from? Just put in the chat box. It could be a city, could be a state, could even be a country, maybe a location in your home, as many of us are working from home today. I'm going to go ahead and put it in for me. I call it in from Salt Lake City, Utah is where I'm calling from. Our headquarters just a little bit south of that. Boy, it looks like kind of all over the United States. Anybody from outside the United States? Checking it out, the Chicagoland, excellent. Naperville. Welcome. Well, Sweden, thank you. Welcome. Probably afternoonish. India, thank you, Deepak. Good to have you. Welcome, welcome. Well, excellent. We'll be using that. That will be our main communication tool. With the number of people we have on the call, we'll need to be using that chat box. So make sure that's up and available. Well, let me go ahead and share my screen as we get going today, and jump right into our discussion as we get going here. So let me start by asking one more polling question. The polling question is, when's the last time you've had a chance to listen to either your company's earnings call, or it could also be maybe a customer, maybe a competitor, But when's the last time you listened to an earnings call? That's my question. You're coming to a how to listen to an earnings call webinar or earnings call lab. Why? When's the last time? Have you ever listened to these? Are these brand new? Kind of get a feel for what your experience is with these earnings calls. Yes, I've listened to them this year. I did them last year. It's been a while. But for some of you, it may be I haven't. Or I'd rather go to the dentist might be the answer there. Now, if you want a good night's rest, go ahead and grab some of these and dig deep. And there's a lot of information that they provide. So what I want to do is give you some shortcuts, some ways to kind of attack it and get the information you need to help you within your role. Let me go ahead and close the poll here real quick, and then we'll get some data there as well. Having a little bit of a technical issue here. Hold on one second. Let's see if I can just close that out. I just had to close out my polling. I wasn't able to give the results. I was having some technical issues, but it looked like many of you have listened to these earnings calls. For some of you, it is brand new. So appreciate your interest. Well, you think about these earnings calls, what's the purpose of them? Well, executives are required to submit, if they're publicly traded on a quarterly basis, they're required to submit financial information to their investors, to regulatory environments here in the United States. Of course, that's going to be the Securities and Exchange Commission, so they're required to submit that. Now, most leaders are going to take that opportunity to communicate to their investors, to communicate to their employees what's going on in the business. Even with these earnings calls, there's some stark or interesting statistics that kind of make you think about the usefulness of these calls. 95% of employees don't understand company strategy. Here's another stat. 90% of employees don't understand their company's important business metrics. Now, folks, these are calls that are available every quarter, and yet even with that, it's challenging to get people to engage and understand what's going on in the business, to participate in these calls. So if there's anything I would add is a great way to set your part in your role is to focus on participating in these calls. It's a great way to understand what your company's focused on, your customers are focused on, what your competitors are focused on. And then with that information, be able to take that and execute day in and day out. Now, imagine you're the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. That's the company we're looking at today. So with those statistics, 95% of employees participate. Now, you may say, Brent, hey, that's not, no way at my company. Are we 95% of us that don't understand our core strategy? It's much lower than that. Well, look at Sir Andrew Witty, CEO. He's actually the new CEO of UnitedHealth Group. He actually also is the CEO of Optum as well. So he's been a part of the organization since, I think, 2018. Been in this industry for years and years. But you're the new CEO of UnitedHealth Group. One of the largest health groups. It used to be the largest. And if you know who the largest is today here in North America, put it in the chat box. But it used to be the largest until a merger happened not too long ago. But you're one of the largest organizations. You process nearly $1 trillion of gross billed charges, manage more than $250 billion in aggregated healthcare spending, have over 330,000 employees. 125,000 of those are clinical professionals. You got those stats of 90% don't understand your strategy. 95%, I mean, that's a significant group not connected. What is it that you want your employees to understand or know? What is it that you need your customers to know? What about your shareholders or even partners? Well, folks, that's what these earnings calls are all about. They're trying to communicate to everybody they can, both their strategic focus of their business, kind of where they've been and where they want to go as a business and what their strategies are around that. As well, they want to share their financial performance, the results of what they've done. Now, my guarantee to you is this. As you participate in these calls, and today I'm going to walk you through a process and a simple framework as well as a tool that will help you to capture the little nuggets of information that you can take back to your team, or if you're just an individual contributor, for your own self to understand what is it my company's trying to do, and based upon what they're trying to do, what can I do to impact that? My guarantee is as you do this for the next 2 to 3 quarters with your company, with your customer, or with your competitors. It truly will build your credibility, your career, and company. We've been in business for 19 years, and we only focus on the topic of business and financial acumen. And by far, this is the thing that really drives home all the teaching, all the experiences that we provide. As employees take the tools we give them and use them on a quarterly basis and be able to execute around that information. So we're going to give you our secret sauce today on how to look at these, how to use it, etc., and walk you through a framework and a tool that will help you to do that. So let's jump in. There's basically 3 steps we're going to give you in the tool to be able to be successful around listening to these earnings calls and capturing what your CEO needs you to know. Number 1, you got to prepare. 2, there's some analysis portion. And then probably the most important is to apply. So let's jump in the preparation phase. As you talk about the preparation phase, what are we talking about there? Well, first of all, let's just do a quick earnings call one-on-one. If you haven't been into an earnings call, a few of you hadn't, if you haven't been to an earnings call, basically they're about somewhere between about 45 minutes to, some of them are an hour and a half. If they try and combine it with their annual meeting, it could be a few hours. But these happen every quarter where they get a chance to communicate. Now, the basic structure of these calls includes 2 parts. Number 1, you'll see on the screen is our prepared remarks. This is where the executives walk through their prepared information, what they want to communicate. They'll talk about their performance. They'll talk about where they're wanting to go and what strategies to kind of work towards that. Once they get done with that, in fact, with UnitedHealth's, it was only about 15 minutes. Their CEO, their COO, and their CFO spoke. Then they quickly shift into analyst questions, a Q&A experience, where most of the time it's going to be these analysts from these large financial institutions who track their stock who are going to ask the clarifying questions. Now, if you really just want to get the basics of what the executive team's talking about, it's going to take you 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes to go through that. Now, I highly recommend spending a little extra time, usually it's about an hour, to listen to the analyst questions. Here's why. This is where you get to see whether or not the market's really tracking or really agreeing or aligning with what the executives are saying. This is kind of the chance to clarify or even challenge what their strategy might be. Now, for the most part, these analysts are just asking greater clarification. How much revenue? Is there any kind of one-time fees that we should expect? What's your forecast in the future? So a lot of clarifying. But every once in a while, you'll see them kind of challenge the data that the executives are communicating. So it's a great way to kind of understand what the market's thinking. So that's the basics of it. In this preparation phase, what do you do? Number 1, you got to locate the caller transcript. I got a new approach. I'm going to see if this works. Give me a thumbs up if you're seeing my screen here. So how do you access this information? Well, if it's pre-call, you're looking for webinar, you're looking for quarterly reviews, etc. So you just come into any, go into Google and just type it in. So I want United Health Group. Actually, it's already right there. I've searched it before. United Health Group Q2 earnings call. Or you can say United Health Group earnings call webcast. You can say earnings call transcript. Whatever it might be, it's going to go. Now, the one thing that I like to do is I want to look specifically for the company itself. You'll notice there's a lot of third-party groups that might be given. So you'll notice down here, www.fool.com. This is Motley Fool. There's a lot of third-party resources that can give you access. But I like to go directly to the organization. So I jump in, I can see it. I go right to UnitedHealth's Investor Relation. Interesting, this just barely came out. In fact, I think it just came out in the last 24 hours because I've been on this site a number of times over the last week or so. But right here, here's their next call. If you're interested, if you're from United Health, when's the next call? It's right there. I can click on that and add it to my calendar. I can actually register for the call, etc. So that's all pre-call. Now, once a call's happened, they often will have the detail and the information. So right here, I got the press release. I want to get the press release that's communicated. Here's a little overview press release. I can download the performance information, etc., to understand what's going on in the business. Not only that, I can jump to stuff like the presentation itself. So earnings reports and presentation. I click down here, and you'll notice for the last few years, I can access information for 2021. So here's Q1 information. I want to go back to last year, see what happened last year. I can find that information. Now, you'll notice there's no transcript here. That's often something after the course you want to get access to. Now, most of the time what they'll do is they'll record it. Interesting enough, United Health Group does not provide a recording. Usually right here, you'd see a recording of that. Well, don't worry, because you go back to that Motley Fool resource and you'll be able to access a recording. So if I type in United Health, can't talk and type at the same time, Q2 transcript. So I noticed they don't have it. I want to find it. I come right here. You'll see Motley Fool. I like Seeking Alpha. So I'll jump to Seeking Alpha. And right here, I now have the transcript. It's documented exactly what was said, both the prepared remarks as well as the information from the analyst questions. Not only that, what I love about Seeking Alpha, it actually has a recording of it. So I can actually access the recording right there as well. Okay, folks, probably more than you wanted to know, but I want to give you how do you access it. If it's pre-call, you're looking for the webcast, you register for it. Often it'll actually give you an invite to your calendar so you know to capture it. If it's post-call, just go to their website and you can download a transcript. If they actually have a slide deck, United Health did not have a slide deck, but if they do, you can have that. A lot of information is available for each one of us. So that's the first thing. Got to locate the call as well as a transcript post the call. Number two, review your notes from past calls. You might be saying, well, Brent, what notes do I have? Well, if this is the first time you've done, you're not going to have any notes. But I can go, like you just saw, I can research the prior quarter. You'll notice they had Q1 transcript, or Q1 press release. They had their Q1 SEC filing, what's called a 10Q. A lot of data. If I want to just do a quick look, I can look at that. A press release is a great thing. If you haven't done anything, if I want to see what happened in a prior quarter, I typically just look at the press release. It's a nice summation of what they've captured. I don't have to go through the whole call. But once you start doing this on a regular basis, the tool that we're going to give you becomes the resource that you go back to. Imagine if you had our tool and you've listened to the earnings call, fill it all out. They go to the Q3 and you want to see on October 14th for United Health. I just quickly open up my tools there, grab my earnings call workbook, and I just quickly review what was their key messaging, what were the challenges they faced. Then when I jump into the call, I'm checking to see has anything changed around it. So that's the second part of the preparation, review your notes. The last thing we'd suggest is meet with your team. Now, what do I mean by that? You don't have to be the team lead. You don't have to be the head of the organization to meet with a team. You can bring colleagues that you work with, say, hey, let's do this together. The reason we suggest that is you'll get a lot more richer experience by doing it with somebody else, both holding each other accountable to filling out the tool, but it also provides some great learning. Well, I think this is what they mean. What do you think? Now, how could we impact that in our team? Here's some ideas, and you kind of share that and build. Now, if you're a leader, I absolutely recommend doing some type of activity around this on a quarterly basis. You have team meetings. Take one team meeting a quarter where you spend a portion of that time. It could be the whole time if you want a full deep dive, or maybe it's a 15-minute where you kind of review what you've assessed, what you found with your team. But that's the preparation phase. Pretty self-explanatory. Get ready to jump into it. Now, analysis, or the analyze phase, is the deep dive. So I want to do a quick review of a model that here at Acumen Learning we've used in our 19 years of experience. For all of you that are graduates, this should look familiar. I want to do a quick review of this simple framework. What I love about this simple framework is it takes business and kind of boils it down to 5 fundamental drivers every company focuses on. And in addition to that, it adds this concept of the financial statements as well. So let's start by talking about cash. In the chat box for me, cash is blank. Fill in the blank for me. As you talk about cash in a business, what are we talking about? Cash is king, absolutely. Queen, and most important, oxygen supply, if you remember Ron Schramm. In fact, we even had a quote in our program, Al Shugart, was it, who said that cash is more important than somebody's mother. Now, I don't know if I believe that, but cash is vitally important. This is the metric that executives are very focused on, yet you often don't hear a lot of communication. In fact, if you listen to this earnings call for United Health, there was very little discussed around their cash. There was a small little portion. They talked about their liquidity position. They're carrying about $19 billion of cash on hand. They're in a strong cash position. But cash is vitally important. If a company runs out of cash, they die. So as you think about cash, how does your role impact cash? Now, if you've taken our course, we've talked about stuff like increasing revenue, reducing costs, has a direct impact on cash. In addition to that, Terms, if you're selling, if you're in a sales role, the terms with your customers. I want to collect that cash faster. If you're dealing with inventory within your role, you may want to have a tremendous amount of spare parts. Well, that's cash sitting in a warehouse. What do I want to do? I want to have the right amount so I don't have any operational downtime, but I want to manage my inventory appropriately. As inventory goes up, you see a reduction of your cash. Of course, from a payable perspective, your vendors, your suppliers, you want to pay slower. Now, of course, everybody in the world wants to do the same thing. Other businesses you work on, they want to collect faster. They want to turn their inventories as quickly as they can. They want to pay slower. And they also want to increase their revenue, reduce cost. So there's a balance in your relationship with your customer, but cash is king. Now, the foundation of the cash driver is going to be that cash flow statement. We won't have much time today to be able to do a deep dive. If you want some better information, come to our website. We have a self-paced online program that's great. We'll give you a nice overview of how to think about the financial statements. Or if you have a big enough group, invite us and we can do both virtual programs or do live in-person programs to help you get a deeper dive. So the next driver we talked about, of course, in the program is profitability. There was two levers that impacted profitability. Two levers. One was increasing something. The other was decreasing. If I want to increase profitability in my business, what are my levers? All those have been through our program. Put in the chat box. If I want to grow profitability, I increase something and or I decrease something. Oh, look at that. Absolutely. Increase your sales or revenue or reduce your cost. Absolutely. That's what I call business 101. That impacts cash. Remember, I said if I can grow my revenue, reduce costs, assuming I collect the dollars, that's going to have a direct impact on my cash. It also impacts profitability, impacts assets and growth. So for me, increasing revenue, reducing costs is business 101. And we talked about profitability. There's different types of metrics you can hear your executives talk about. The most common ones are going to be like gross profit, operating profit, or net profit. Now, the one term I want to make sure you capture, in fact, I'll put it in the notes just as a reminder. There's three. A profit driver has more terms that are used interchangeably than any of the other drivers. So let me just give you a little help there. Income, earnings, and profit are all the same thing. If you didn't know that, put that in your notes somewhere. Income, earnings, and profit are the same thing. So an executive could call it gross profit, they could call it gross income, or they could call it gross earning. Operating profit, operating earnings, or operating income, or net profit, net earnings, or net income. Some additional ones you may have heard is EBIT or EBITDA. These are all profit measures. If you want extra credit, put in the chat box. What does EBIT or EBITDA stand for? Let's see if we can share our knowledge with the rest of the group. Now, the foundation of income, the profit drivers is absolutely going to be the income statement. Now, this is the one you hear a lot about. This is one your executives talk. Every company I work with talks about profitability in some form of another. It looks like we're getting some insight. Earnings before income tax, close. Earnings before interest and tax. There you go. That's the first one. Now, can we get the last one? Earnings before interest tax. We got I think Smith has got depreciation. What's the last one? The A stand for? Great job. Amortization. Excellent. Those are key profitability. If you hear your executive talk about any of those metrics, think, what am I doing to increase revenue and how am I managing our costs? Asset drive, we talk about both what we call asset strength and asset utilization, and there's this balance between the two. How much do I hold on cash per se to withstand the COVID-19 downturn versus how much do I deploy to build out my assets to generate more in the future? That balance has all sorts of metrics you can look at. Where your asset strength metrics are going to be stuff like your current ratios, your equity ratio, debt to equity ratio is a very common one you'll hear executives talk about. If you want to talk more about the utilizations, you're looking at stuff like return on your assets. How much net income do I generate for every dollar of assets I have? Or return on equity, return on invested capital. Again, if you're hearing a lot of terms, you're saying, Brent, you're giving me way too much terms. That's okay. You don't have to memorize this. We've got tools that will help you to kind of capture them. But it's all about how am I deploying my assets to be as effective and efficient as I can. Of course, growth is then what investors expect. Vitally important, a publicly traded company. Every one of these executives are going to talk about growth if they're publicly traded, even if they're not growing. They'll talk about restructuring, downsizing, outsourcing. We're doing all these things so we can now grow. Of course, people is the core of any business model. I think that's something that's unique to us. We're very focused on this idea. You can have a great cash position, profitability metrics or measures, assets to deploy and growth. But if you can't understand the customers you sell your products or services to, and or you can't get your team to execute around it, you won't be successful in business. Well, folks, that's a little introduction to our content and our experience, a foundational principle that's part of this tool. So how do I use the 5-driver model to help me understand an earnings call? Let me give you 2 tools that will help us to do. The first one's called the executive alignment. We call it an activity. I'd also refer to it as a tool. It's basically taking those 5 drivers, and as I listen to the call, every time they say something about cash, I put a little slash mark. Every time they say something about profit, I put a little slash mark. Assets, growth, and people. By the end of the day, you end up seeing a bunch of marks. Now, of course, I'm not doing it as well as I should be. I should have my Apple pen out there. Sorry for all of our Apple colleagues. But eventually, you're going to get a summation of these numbers. Right across here, how many times did they talk about cash, profit, asset, growth of people? Now, you might be saying to me, well, Brent, that's great, but I've never taken one of your class. I don't even know that I know what would be the terms they would use that would speak to cash. Well, we've thought of that. There's a nice definition on this tool. Not only a definition, but some examples, what I call trigger words, words that you're looking for. So you're looking for sources and uses of cash. If they're talking about dividends or distributions, all that is taking some of your cash and giving it back to your investors. Well, there's a slash for cash. If they're talking about debt, they're accessing cash. Okay, there's an access to cash. In the end, that's how the tool works. Once you listen to the call, you start getting all these slash marks around what are they talking about. You're then going to answer 4 simple questions. Number 1, which business driver seems to get the most attention? And I love the second part of it, and why? What were the 2 or 3 main points the executive was trying to make? What are their goals and objectives going forward? And because it's an earnings call, what were the key analyst questions they're asking? With this tool, that 95% issue, 95% of employees, based upon the Harvard Business Review study, suggest 95% of employees don't understand their key strategies. This is how you understand your company's strategy. Imagine if you did this 2 to 3 times consecutive, how quickly you'd hear, yeah, this is exactly what they're focused on, and here's what I can do. Well, folks, I want to practice using that. The way we're going to do that is I'm going to need some help from you. So get your chat box open. So we have that. Oh, it looks like I had a question. Kelvin Brent's, turnover. Oh, he's talked about that. Yep. Kelvin answered that question. It is net sales or net revenue. It's a form of revenue or sales top line, and it's more of an international term. You'll hear it in Europe quite a bit. Well, here's what I've got. I've got a quote from their CEO, Sir Andrew Witty, their CEO. And what I want to do is let's practice using this. So here's the first sentence. What I want you to do is I read it. I want you to put in the chat box, which of the 5 drivers is Mr. Witty talking about? I hope you sense its growing momentum as we advance our path of improving the quality, cost, and experience of healthcare for everyone we serve. What metrics, which of these 5 drivers do you hear Mr. Witty in that first quote? Which one is he talking about? Gerald's saying all. Yeah, definitely. Right here, you got growing. The moment you hear the term, that's going to be there. Absolutely. Healthcare for everyone we serve. They're people. You talk about profitability as well in there as you talk about cost. What's it going to cost, etc. So absolutely. Okay, let's jump to the next one. Both Optum as well as UnitedHealthcare grew and delivered on our long-lasting strategy. We've increased our outlook for the year to be in the range of $18.30 to $18.80 per share. If you're not familiar with this term, that's their earnings per share term. Absolutely, they're growing that. They've taken their original forecast and they're upping it. And it's definitely a growth metric. You could say profit as you think about EPS as a profit metric for sure. Okay, here's the last one. It's actually one whole sentence, so apologize. A lot of different grammatical uses, I guess. What am I trying to say? It's all the quotes and different things. But here it says, we continue to prioritize 3 key themes that we believe will underpin the next era of growth for our enterprise. First, unlocking the collaborative opportunities within and between Optum and UnitedHealthcare. How do we bring those groups together and collaborate? Secondly, increasing applying technology to improve patient care and experience and to help run a better system. And third, strengthen our customer-focused capabilities and values. What are you seeing? Yeah, definitely people there, right? You got customer focus. We got growth in there. You know, you can talk about asset utilization, deploying those assets more efficiently, definitely play out. Well, folks, as you do this, what you're going to find, if you and I were to do this together today, we wouldn't get exactly the same number of slash marks, profit marks. So it's not an exact science. That being said, we do about 1,000 sessions a year, different industries, different organizations, and invariably the top 2 or 3 drivers will rise to the top. Even though our numbers may not be exactly the same, the theme will definitely be the same. Well, let's do another one. Here's another one. I'm not going to read it. You just put it in the chat box. This comes from John Jacks, their Chief Financial Officer. What do you see there? Which drivers is he focusing on? So we're getting profit there. Growth is coming up. Growth and profit. You know, remember, earnings is another term for profitability. Of course, revenues, part of profitability for sure. You got increase, you got growth for sure. Expand our home and community health platform. This is a huge one, but definitely people play out in that. 20 million patients being served at Optum Care. Definitely people driver. Well, not only do you have the executives in their prepared remarks communicate, and you can capture details or information around the strategic focus of the business, but you'll also find that you'll have analysts asking questions. This comes from Lance Wilkes. He's a VP Senior Equity Analysis and equity analyst. He works with Bernstein, and he is very much focused in the healthcare space. Here's his question. What do you see there? So this is now an analyst perspective. What are they asking about? Which driver? So the digital first and virtual, we get a lot asset kind of perspective. That growth there for sure. Speaking to kind of how much will that contribute in the next year? Could be the sales cycle brings in some of that profitability that you're seeing there. Well, folks, that's how you use the tool. Now imagine if you're listening to your company's call, and after going through an hour call, how quickly you start to see the themes. Man, we're really talking about cash quite a bit. For those of you who are on the call, I keep bringing this up because it was such a big deal last year. Those of us who were with us in Boeing, when we did Boeing earlier last year, they had to borrow $42 billion of cash because the COVID-19 just really decimated their business. It was really a challenge. All the airlines pulled back. They had the 737 MAX issue. So you would see a lot more talk about cash there. Versus you'll talk about like Amazon we looked at last year, right? Amazon, rapid growth. Their Q2 of last year was bigger than their typically highest quarter, which is Q4 of 2019. They did $89 billion, about, I can't remember exactly how many billion more than they did in their biggest year. So growth becomes. Now you start capturing that data, then you got to kind of ask the questions around. Well, don't worry, we don't have time to go through it. We could go through the whole thing. It would take us more than an hour to get through. So what I've done is I did it for you. I've got it here, and on the left-hand side, you'll see kind of my prepared remarks, what I saw from a prepared remarks. I like to break it up this way. Now, you don't have to do it this way. You can just calculate it as a whole group. But I like to see kind of where the analysts are focused versus where the executive team is focused and see if they're congruent. You'll see, for example, growth is definitely fairly congruent, but then you see a lot more over here on the people driver. Although it's fairly high, it's the highest one for prepared remarks. You see a lot more questions around how does it impact employees, et cetera. So again, notice here, cash, you got a couple of comments, nothing here. Not a lot of questions from the analysts from that. Well, once you capture that data, you then ask these questions. So I did it. Let me give you my analysis of what I saw doing this activity, what we call the executive alignment activity. So which of the business drivers seem to get the most attention and why? By far, it was people. You can see it right here. If you jump back here, there's my people, 79. Now, this is something interesting. I've taught in the healthcare space, the number of payers and other providers, et cetera. And this is one industry, everywhere I go, all the other industries I teach, where people are definitely always at the top, it seems. Why? Because think about what they're doing. They're providing services for members, right? And it's at a very important time of our life. When we're sick, when we're trying to improve our health. So you hear a tremendous amount of interest around the members, the employees, provide an incredible experience. Now, of course, you combine that with COVID and all the things that are there in the heart of what's going on in the industry. Let me give you a couple of quotes that stood out to kind of speak to why people, or where they're focusing around people. I hope you sense our growing momentum as we advance our path to improving the quality, cost, and experience of healthcare for everyone we serve. Well, they want to get it better and better, providing more and more services for us. We are doubling down our efforts to both expand and link services where it creates value for customers and patients to make the healthcare journey easier. I love this. Simpler and more intuitive. Isn't that what we want with our healthcare? You try and deal with healthcare situations. You take a child to the doctor, and all the different ins and outs and billing and other stuff. To have somebody to help is absolutely a value offer. Everything they do has, so why people, for me, everything they do has a focus on their members. They're trying to improve health, preventative health, and then lessen the acute health. One of the big challenges of COVID-19, if you were with us on AstraZeneca a few months ago, we looked at that, is that people are holding off on getting their regular checkups and dealing with some of the issues they're dealing with during COVID. Why? You go back to Q2 of last year, the whole industry, the whole world shut down. Your ability to access medical treatment and effort was both risky as well as something you felt like, well, there's more serious things to deal with. So they're worried about, well, people aren't getting their basic healthcare needs, so we're going to increase the acute nature of what's going on in the business. So a big, important health or focus around trying to do that. You sure this is United Healthcare? Well, yes. It's an insurance company as well. So that contrast between their efforts to help and then sometimes the challenges around working through systems and processes, I see the comment there, Jacqueline, and I will laugh out loud with you. I don't know that I'll comment more on that. But if you jump in, what else? The other two that stood out to me were assets and growth. Accelerating our efforts to develop and deploy new and innovative products informed by the insights of both Optum and UnitedHealth, using that analytical data to help us know preventative stuff, as well as where do we get the best services, where do we get the lowest cost. They described, for example, just by changing the location of where they provided a prescription, reduced the cost by about $7,000. They did it through a hospital versus doing it through one of these care clinics, a significant reduction of cost. Provide products and services that allow members to be served when and where they want. House calls, care at home, virtual services. Huge growth in virtual services. Not only that, around the behavioral health. When they talk behavioral health, they include mental health. Over 500,000 individuals were served through UnitedHealth's, and it's for those that have UnitedHealth coverage, it's part of their package to get that mental health services, which is quite interesting. Outcome from COVID. So people was definitely by far the biggest. Assets and growth. Why? They're focused on dealing with the COVID pandemic. They're right in the heart of that, trying to provide services for their customers. The outside of the back end of that is how do we make sure people are getting their care post-COVID experiences. Well, what were the two or three key main points? Well, they actually highlighted these three themes as they talk about growth for their company. First, unlock the collaborative opportunities within and between Optum and UnitedHealthcare. Bringing those groups together, get the synergies that benefit their members. Secondly, increasing and applying technology to improve patient care experience and help the system run better. For those of you in the chat box, just how many of you have actually shifted and have started to use some of the virtual healthcare benefits? Teledoc or a behavioral health type resource. That's been a huge transition for many people. It's been available for a lot of us, but COVID kind of forced us a little bit to get more comfortable with that because it was easier to do that than to try and go into a medical where you got to have everything checked out before you can go in case you have COVID. But that's been an interesting transition you're seeing. Third, strengthen our customer focus, capabilities, and value. What additional key metrics? Provide more products and services where members want and need them. A real emphasis of thinking outside the normal ways in which we get access to that. Stronger quarter, continue to trend towards base or normalized levels. This is something they talked a lot about, this idea of individuals not getting their typical health care because of COVID, how it's people are less likely to get the checkups they need to. And then even when they have an issue, they delay it based upon their ability to access their primary care physician. So they're talking about, they're starting in 2022, the first half of this year, we started to see there's a real trend the other way where less and less health services were being provided. Now we're starting to get back to some of those baseline or normalized level, which overall is probably a good thing. Like if we're not doing our annual checkups and the preventative stuff, obviously that becomes more challenging as we're not dealing with any issues that might be there. So that was a big emphasis of their conversation. So what are the goals and trends? Obviously the goals and trends, which we talked here, I'm not going to revisit those. Those are the same goals and trends. But some kind of financial metrics. Long-term, they want a 13 to 16% earnings percent growth rate year over year, and that's over the next few years. Help people live healthier lives and help the health system work better for everyone over the years to come. Although we kind of jokingly say, is this really an insurance company when we talk so much about people? I think they are really trying to figure out ways to make it better, more efficient, et cetera. Obviously, there's work to be done, but they want to play a significant role. And at $257 billion of revenue, they definitely play a significant role. Okay, I didn't see, did anybody get who's bigger than them? Did we get that in there? We probably did, and I just missed it. It's CVS. There you go, Brooklyn Parks. There you go. So what were the key questions or concerns that were raised? I kind of highlight just a couple here. COVID impact on financial performance. There's a lot of questions from the analysts. What's in this dollar? They're saying that 1830 to 1880 earnings per share dollar includes a reduction of $1.80 based upon COVID's impact this year. So the idea is once we can get on the other side of COVID, you should see almost a $2 improvement in the earnings per share. So a lot of questions from the analysts, like what's made up in that? They're really trying to tease out, is it legitimately just a COVID thing or is it something that might be ongoing? Normalization of care and the delay of care. That idea of, are we getting back to baselines? Are people really, or are we going to see a real uptick on COVID issues? I actually had COVID, and I had a kind of a bad case. I ended up getting on oxygen and a few things. Didn't have to go to the hospital. But one of the things is I talked to my primary care is what's the long-term impact to my lungs? I had issue with breathing. And so long-term impact of lungs, that has an impact to the future. But then on top of that, people delaying their health care, which means are we going to see an uptick on more problems in the future? So questions around that. Capacity constraints around Optum healthcare as that gets higher and higher demand around kind of getting your services where you want them, et cetera. Strategies around lowering cost and what's the right baseline to use around COVID-19 2020. So folks, that's the tool. Now at this point, what do I know? Well, I know they had a real focus on people, assets, and growth. I also know some of their strategies around trying to bring Optum together, get some more efficiencies. How can they reduce costs as well as provide and increase the services to their customers? I know some of the strategies around what they're trying to do. Now, let's jump in the financial tool. Now, you don't have to have an MBA or be a CFO to get through this tool. This tool brings the 5 drivers that we just talked about, as well as some of the most common key metrics. Now, for those of you in healthcare, you'll notice you don't see a medical expense or medical loss ratio. You don't see an operating expense ratio, et cetera, which are very common metrics. But if you know what those are, you can quickly do the calculations really quickly, right? These are the more common metrics most companies look at. And then if you want to fine tune it a little bit, if you know the industry, bring in a couple of the metrics that might be important to them. Within that industry. But these are the key metrics. And not only that, where do you go in the statements to find how they're performing? So here's what I want to do. I want to practice using that as well. The way we're going to do that is we're going to do about 4 or 5 together. So get your chat box ready to go. And let's start with cash. How much cash and cash equivalents did UnitedHealthcare have at the end of Q2 2021. Now, where did I go to do that? Well, my cash flow or cash and cash equivalent, is going to be found on my balance sheet. You'll see it right here. Balance sheet's where I'm going to go. So you don't have the balance sheet, but I do. So let me open it up. Here's the balance sheet. If you've taken our class, you may remember that on a GAAP financial statement, which stands for Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, the most liquid is going to be at the top. The least liquid in the asset section is going to be at the bottom. So, of course, the most liquid is actually already cash. And the number there we got, Sam is saying it's 19 billion. Oh, look at that. Brooklyn put all the zeros in to make sure we're there. So it's not 19,832. Brooklyn wanted to make sure we got all those zeros in there. That's $19,832 million. Show off there. I love it. Absolutely. Right here's the number. And we're looking at 19 billion 839. Now you can look. A year ago this time, we're at 16,932,000,000. If you want more information as to why that happened, you jump into the cash flow statement to see that. So I go back to my tool and I see I'm at 19,832,000,000. Let's see if you can do that. We want to get the cash from operations. We're looking for something around net cash provided by operation. Now, what statement do I need to go to? Put it in my chat box. I want to make sure you're comfortable using it. What statement am I needing to go to get access to my cash from operations? Okay, thank you, Eileen. Absolutely. We want to get that. Okay, now you don't have it, so I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. We're going to the cash flow statement. Excellent. So I go to my cash flow statement. I'm looking for cash flow from operating activity, net cash provided by operating activities. Go about a third of the way down, and you'll see it. Cash flows from operating activities. Once you see that number, if you can, put it in the chat box. There you go. It's this number right here. You'll see it right there. That's the number. That's how much cash UnitedHealth Group generated in the first 6 months of 2021. Now, they're not breaking it off as a quarterly. I could have gone back to Q1 and took reduced it by the Q1 numbers, but I just went ahead and did that number there. Now, of course, what do you think investors want your cash you generate to do year over year? They want it to increase, they want it to decrease, or they want it to just kind of be flat? What would you guess? Absolutely. Want to see that increase every month, every quarter, every year. You see a little bit of a drop. If you want to jump in a little more detail to see what happened 1 year versus a year, you start looking through some of these numbers. That's kind of beyond this course. We just look at what that number is. I plug it in, $11,545,000,000. Okay. Well, let's go to the last statement we haven't looked at. And we're going to do just the profit section. These three numbers, we're going to first capture the two numbers to then do this calculation down here. So I got to get my total revenue, also known as net. It could be net revenue, net sales, total revenue, total sales, however you do that. What statement are we going to go to just to make sure we're comfortable using this tool? Again, I come to my, there you go. Going to go to my income statement. So we got our income statement. While we're here, let's go ahead and pick up both. We want to get our total revenue number, but we also want to get our net earnings or net income number. Now, we want the very bottom line. The way you know it's very bottom line, they'll have two lines underneath it. That's the net earnings number. Notice they're not calling it net income. They're calling it net earnings or net earnings attributable to UnitedHealthcare. So let's get first the revenue. What's our total revenue? Put in the chat box. And we just want the quarterly numbers, okay? We're starting with the quarterly numbers. So how much revenue in Q2 did UnitedHealth generate? There you go, $71 billion. Now, how much net income did they generate? You jump. So right here, we got this number. That's how much revenue. Here's our net income number right here. Okay. So I come back, I plug in my revenue, I then plug in my net income. Now I'm ready to do the calculation to get what's called the net margin. I take the $4.2 billion net income divided by total revenue. Most of your margins, or all of your margins around profitability, is what they call a percent of total revenue or total sales, net revenue, net sales, whatever your top line is, right? It's a percentage of that. So grab your calculator. This is the only one I'm going to have you do from a calculation. Let's do a quick calculation just so I know you're comfortable doing it. Take the 4266. I'll do it with you. Take the 4266, divide it by the 71,321. Now, if you want to just move the decimal point two places, you can do it, or multiply by 100. It's going to give you a number. When you get that, this says for every $100 UnitedHealth brought in Q2 of 2021, how much net profit did they generate? Jeff Reed is telling us it was $5.98, or a 5.98% net profit margin. I was lazy, rounded up to 6, but you're exactly right. I got the same number, 5.9. So what does that say? For every $100 UnitedHealth brought in total revenue, they generated $5.98 of net profit. Now, if I want to increase that, grow my revenue, reduce my costs or my levers. Now, of course, in healthcare space, there's some regulatory things around how much you're paying out in benefits. So there's operating expenses where you see a lot of pressure around managing those. Well, folks, that's how you use the tool. Now, you don't have to fill the rest of it out. We don't have time to do that, but hopefully that gives you more comfortability. It's just quickly. Now, if you find yourself saying, Brent, I haven't taken your class. I don't really know what this metric is. Well, there's this great website, I'm kind of promoting it today. I wish I had a cut of what they're doing. It's called Google. Type in cash from operation. Now, what is that? Talk to a colleague. What does that mean for us here at our business? But you get the framework where you can get a quick number, and you can tell whether or not they've improved numbers year over year by just looking. Look at revenue change year over year. You'll notice a few things. Look at this. Look at how their net profit last year in the first Q2 of last year was really strong. Improvement year over year versus the next. Now, why? What caused that? Well, I'll give you the quick answer. We quit going to the doctor. Their profitability skyrocketed because we delayed our service. Think of Q2 last year, how everything got shut down to some extent. And then this year, you're back to more normal use of their healthcare products or services. Now, folks, you can do it as a year-over-year comparison. I can do Q2 to Q2 of last year. I can also use Q2 of this year, what they call sequential, Q2 of this year, and compare it to Q1 of this year. I can also, though, go to the year to date. This is the first 6 months of this year, 2021, versus the first 6 months of last year. And you see some numbers, kind of what happened. If you wanted more detail, you dive deeply into that. What I've just shared on Q2 would be the same impacts. But I can also use this tool. Maybe I don't want to just look at our company. I want to look at a competitor. So I look at CVS Health. Look at what's happened there. This is very similar. Look at the revenue numbers, very similar revenue numbers, yet you're getting a bigger margin here. If I want to look at competitively, why is that? Now, our colleagues, I got a number of my colleagues here who works with CVS. They could probably jump in and here's exactly why it's different, et cetera. Probably dealing with commercial versus individual health plans, Medicare, Medicaid issues, governmental regulations, et cetera, that impact some of those numbers. You look at You can use it that way. Not only that, you can look at any company. Last month, everybody was with us. We looked at Raytheon Technologies right here, right? This is last number. So I can look at their numbers versus a company totally outside their industry. The nice thing about it is it allows you to have the comparison. And that the comparison is where you really get some detail around the numbers. Why is it going up? Why is it going down? You can do some research around that. Looks like Brooklyn's adding some little insights. Profits are capped. Absolutely. There's some regulation around what they call the medical loss ratio, medical expense ratio, benefits loss ratio, benefits ratio, whatever you want to call it. Basically, they have to pay out 80 to 85% of their premiums in benefits. And if not, they do a rebate or a refund that they can do. They can provide additional services, but they got to pay out a certain percent. So Brooklyn's absolutely correct on that. Well, folks, that's the analysis phase. What do I know at this point? Well, I now understand that the company is focused on cost reduction, trying to get their customers more added value resources. And right now they're performing quite well from a financial perspective. Now, what do I do with that? Well, the last section of this is all about application. Folks, this is the key. If you don't take it and use it, you're wasting our time. In fact, here at Acumen Learning, that's the core of what we do. We're trying to help people understand their business and how they can impact the success of the business. We work with many organizations, in fact, 30 of the Fortune 50 of our clients. At one point, one of our clients had a third-party group assess what is it that Acumen Learning really provides for their employees? How does it really impact the success of them? They found over a 300% return on their investment of doing work with us. But here's some of the more common things that customers say they get out of our program. For those of you that have been part of our program, just read through this. What are the things that impacted the success in your business? Was it improve the performance of your business and function? Increase your collaboration, the better ability to work across different groups? Improve upward communication, how you communicate with your investors? Improve employee engagement, increase business focus, or improve teamwork? What are the things you've gotten out of the program? Folks, that's what this application is. This application phase is all about, now that I've got it, what am I going to do? How am I going to use this information to increase my collaboration within my business? How am I going to use this to improve my ability to communicate with my upward management? Folks, you're functionally brilliant. You know more about your functional role than I'll ever understand. The goal of understanding business and financial acumen is your ability to navigate the organization, to move from a functional expert to a business expert. Mr. Witty didn't start as the CEO of the organization, but at some time in his career, he decided, I know my own role. Let me understand the business and help us make the connection, get greater execution, improve the engagement of my employees, increase my business focus as a group. That's what this tool is all about, is help you to do that. So the application is the key part. To know and not to do is not to know. If you don't do anything with it, I've wasted your time. So let me give you just quickly what I found from an application, new insights. For me, this whole thing, this one really makes me think the idea of people delaying their care because of what's going on in COVID is concerning to me. It makes me think, when's the last time I had my checkup? What about my family members? Encouraging people to make sure they're getting their care, preventative stuff to help us on the other side of COVID. Care is trending towards that baseline was huge. That makes me feel better versus where we were last year. Effort to providing the right product services where members want. And this behavioral health is one, obviously, we're all, one of the factors of COVID is the health implications that I dealt with, breathing issues or whatever. But there's also the mental health, people secluded, separated, etc. I love this idea that 500,000 virtual visits in just the last year, as they provided that as a new service. I think each one of us have family or friends, or even maybe us individually, who felt a little bit of a challenge going through this transition of COVID and how it's impacted our careers, our families, our significant others, etc. So those are some of the insights that kind of stood out to me. Obviously, a strong company, very successful, etc. So what am I going to do? What is I'm going to do? Well, our company is a training company. So I want to compare their performance with their peers. I did a little bit of comparison on CVS. I'm going to talk to my colleagues who work with CVS, say, tell me what's that big difference in their margins, etc. Share the information on my findings with the consultants, clients, and customers that I work with. There's great information you can learn from different industry, different business that can help your organization. And then our goal is we do a little work for UnitedHealth. I want to do a bigger opportunity. I want to find more customers within UnitedHealth, Optum, etc. And many of you are from there, so hopefully you appreciate the work that our Kelvin Brent's extraordinaire is my term for him. One of our great consultants does a lot of work. Man, if we can do anything else to help earnings calls, etc., I want to be part of that. That's our goal, is to help employees understand their company and truly understand what they can do to impact that. Well, my last step of the applied tools, you got to have a conversation. You got to do something with that. If it's a company that you analyze, if it's your own company, it's a conversation with your manager. Here's what I heard. Here's the 2 or 3 things I think I can do. Are we on the same page? If it's a customer, so for me, it's a conversation with our sales team. Here's what I saw at UnitedHealth. Here's what my consultants that are working. How can we create a greater opportunity to help them be successful in these transitions? You think about the things they're talking about, right? Providing a greater customer experience, lowering their costs. If we can help every employee of their 330,000 employees to reduce $1 a month, what sort of impact would that have on their profitability? Well, sometimes if they don't understand the business, it's going to be hard to do. So for me, it's a conversation with our team as we look at trying to provide that services, because that would be a customer or partner for us. If you analyze a competitor or benchmark company, maybe it's where you sit down with your strategy team or internally. How can we sell differently versus our competitors? How can we set ourselves apart against our competitors, etc.? But that's the last step of it. Once you've done that analysis, you come up with some action items. Go have a conversation with your manager, with your colleagues, your peers, and execute around that. Well, folks, that is the process. You got to prepare by accessing the information. You review your notes. And then then you got to, when you do the analysis, you got to do an executive alignment, look at their strategic focus, financial, and then apply. Well, as we wrap up, you remember that second step of our prepare phase was all about reviewing your notes. Oops, hit the wrong button. So what are those notes? Well, this tool becomes your note. As you do this with your customers, your competitors, or your own company every quarter, every month, every year, you're going to be able to have that information. And I guarantee this, if you do 2 or 3 consecutively, you'll know what's going on. You'll start to see the trend. The executives tend to have the same framework every time. It's just different numbers, maybe some different strategies. But you'll get to where you can quickly do this analysis in maybe 15 minutes. Once you've listened to the call, about 15 minutes, you can do the quick analysis. The majority of the time will be just around the calculations of those financial metrics and measures. So here's my question to you in the chat box. Have I prompted some interest in you enough that you're saying, you know what, Brent, I'm going to do something with this? Who are you going to analyze? Is it a company that you want to work for, that you're working for, a company you sell to, compete against, partner with, invest in, interested in, or next month we're looking at Chevron? Maybe it's Chevron you want to look at, and then come prepared to ask questions at the end about what we found from your research. Which one do you want to do? Put in the chat box. Well, folks, it's been my pleasure to spend some time with you. Let me wrap up by getting you access to the tool. There's one location. Go to acumenlearning.com/webinar. That's where you can get access to the tool. You'll get access to the workbook. Not only there, if you want to sign up for the Chevron earnings call, a webinar that we have here in a month, go ahead and sign up. It's right there. You can also suggest any companies you think we should look at in the future. We take that as we make decisions. If you want a refresher, if you're new to this and it's just yourself, we've got a very award-winning, strong online program called Seeing the Big Picture. It walks through the 5 drivers as well as the 3 financial statement, the tools that we talked about. We'll give you $100 off for participating in our webinar. So it makes it very economical to get a nice foundation on this number. So please go to acumenlearning.com/webinar, give us feedback, and we'll see you next month. If there's any questions, I'm going to stay on, and my team will stay on. We'll try and answer any questions that you might have. If not, thank you so much for your time, and have a great day and a great month. We'll see you in a month. So we got Ginger's putting that link in there, so you can just click on it and go right there, which is great. Thank you, everybody. Maria, thank you so much. Smitha, thank you for joining us. If there's anybody who has additional questions, like I said, we'll stay on these calls. This is really focused on how to listen to the earnings call. We often could do this for United Healthcare, where we do a deep dive, where we really look at exactly what was said, how their metrics are trending, et cetera. So that deeper dive is what we call an earnings call debrief, which is a great thing for employees to be able to get together and walk through how to use that tool with a little bit of coaching, which is a great resource. So we do that as a great a follow-on to a program like this. If you're interested in that, reach out to us. Let us know how we can help. Thank you, Miriam, for joining us. Appreciate it. Folks, thank you very much for your time. It looks like just a few of you are still on. If you have any additional questions, Ginger's also put in the link to get access to the workbook, sign up for our next session, give us some feedback, as well as our offer for our Seeing the Big Picture online program, self-paced. 13 modules, great content around the 5 drivers and the financial statements. It's a great baseline. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Otherwise, thank you very much. Just go ahead and leave the meeting. Well, folks, it looks like we're not getting any other information in the chat box, which is fine. No worries. We'll go ahead and we're going to start shutting it down. Unless you have any additional questions, let us know now. Otherwise, we're going to shut the course down. Thank you very much. And please join us next month. Invite your friends, your colleagues to participate. Thank you much and have a great day. Ginger, let's go ahead and shut it down.